Alright, hello and welcome to Mike Makes Stuff live stream number 4. This is the last live stream for the month of February, which means this may be the last time you get to see me working on this piece. It doesn't mean it's the last time I will work on this piece, but it's probably the last time I'm going to stream it for this month. So if you're watching, if you're following it all, you'll notice that some of this is significantly more advanced than it was last week. Go ahead and check the end of last week's stream if you want to do a comparison. I think we were pretty much finished with the body on Falcon, but his wings weren't in yet. I did a lot of back and forth on his wings. You look here, this is his Marvel Now costume. And there's some nods here to this, which is his Winter Soldier one. I believe this is his Age of Ultron, which has some nicer colors to it. But the wings aren't quite so advanced. Like we have here this like partially see-through mesh that kind of reminds me of the hard light wings he got later in the comics, where basically they're weightless, but still do physics. Obviously these wouldn't be weightless, but there's a reference there that I really like. And I particularly like some of these transparencies. I didn't work that in. You see how that kind of becomes this, and I'm not so much a fan of this one where it looks ultra simplified. It really reminds me of Archangel's wings, which were super cool, and then later you kind of, I got tired of them. I'm happy with what we have here. It's an amalgamation of a couple of designs, and I think it looks wing-like enough and dramatic enough and still mechanical enough. If I was probably going to draw him over and over again, I might work it a little bit differently, but I'm pretty happy with what's here right now. May still change this annulus on the side of his chest. Manifold, our favorite Aboriginal Australian. I quite enjoyed working on him. I feel like the face came out really nicely after a couple of tries. This is probably the one I had to reference the least. There's a layer I can actually turn on. No? Okay. And I've also added his teleportation circle. You can find the character spotlight for Manifold on the Patreon. I believe that's a public post, so you can read it if you'd like. But suffice to say, Manifold is named for a physics concept where he's able to touch 2 points in space-time together with each other, allowing people to teleport. It's kind of a Stitch-in-Time kind of idea, except way more complicated. And my idea for this whole piece was kind of that Manifold was teleporting these heroes in to face whatever threat. I kind of need to decide if I want this to be completely behind or maybe partially in front of Devil Dinosaur. If I were to paint this, it would probably be a light effect, and that would be a little bit more malleable. But since this is going to end in inks, I'm going to keep it behind everything. I also did Spectrum. Spectrum is living electromagnetic energy, and I'm pretty happy with what came out here, particularly through here, as obviously I'm working digitally, and I struggle often to make the digital pieces look like pencils. I don't want them to look digital, so to speak. I want it to look like I worked on regular paper, and I think I've accomplished that here. She does have a little bit of a mannish face. I was referencing this wondrous actress, whose name escapes me at the moment, who is from Firefly and later on Suits, and then I heard she was going to be on Game of Thrones, but maybe that changed, or it was fake news or something. So right, we've got 3 of 6, and today I'm working on Shuri. If you are not following Ta-Nehisi Coates' current run on Black Panther and Wakanda. Shuri is T'Challa's sister. She was the Black Panther at one point when T'Challa abdicated the throne and became the Black Panther of Bast. Black Panther is both the character's name, but it's also a title. Literally, the king is the Black Panther. So when he abdicated the throne, she became the queen, and she became the Black Panther of Wakanda. He became the Black Panther of the Panther god, serving her directly. Or goddess, I suppose. In the recent comics, she went on a spirit journey and, recounted decades of Wakandan history and came back with a whole new costume and crazy bird powers. And I haven't been to the comic book store in a couple of weeks. So I'm not 100% sure on exactly what's going on now, but this is just really cool. So we're going to work on her first. Oops, that wasn't right. And I'm probably going to get pretty quiet here for a bit, listen to some music, and I'm going to draw. Headdress is pretty complicated, and I'm not 100% sure I'm getting it right, but I'm going to go with it anyway. struggles with drawing female faces is that too many lines and they start to look mannish or too old, too few lines, and they kind of look like mannequins. And neither is really the goal here. So you'll notice I'm going back to the reference very frequently. I find it easier to memorize just a tiny bit of the costume at a time, to try and get the details as right as possible. But if I put the reference right in the picture, I tend to find it distracting. Everybody's got to find their own method. But when I'm using an image just for a costume reference, I find it easier to have it stowed somewhere else. These are kind of cool, these big tusk earring things. There we go, I don't think that's too bad. And it hides most of her ear. And ears are annoying and hard to draw. Actually gonna add one of her dreads here. And that's gonna hide some more of it. The reason I'm hiding it isn't necessarily because it's hard to draw, at least with the case of this ear, but rather we don't usually show all of our ears unless we have a very short haircut. So to see all of it when she's got this elaborate headdress on and she's got long hair seems kind of improbable. If you have specific questions or anything you actually want to see, go ahead and let me know. Just checking to see if we have any messages. We don't. Again, I'm not 100% sure on some of these parts of the headdress. By the reference image I have makes it look like this is directly connected to the front part of the headdress. doing one of those no good, very bad things that my mentors have told me not to do, and inking while I pencil. But I still think that it helps me get a grip on where everything's supposed to be. So, probably keep doing it. Well, and to some extent, especially at this digital level, there's really no difference except for these areas where you see gradation. When I go in and ink that, I'll have to use lines that are thin enough, i.e., there's space between them, because they'll all be full solid black. That's not the case here, so it's a good exercise anyway, but I could certainly approach things that way in the future and skip that whole phase. I just kind of like inking, so I'm going to keep doing it for now. There's no reason I couldn't skip it in the future. Wonder if this character catches on, if we'll look at these earrings in 20 years and be like, why did we think those were so cool? I don't like Mystique's costume design in the 80s, where, you know, it evolved well over time, but, you know, that big hair and the giant earrings, not really a practical choice, even if you are a shapeshifter. Maybe she can wear giant earrings because she's apparently made of birds. If you read the blog post this week, you'll notice that I mentioned that this month's Patreon dues are going to go to buying a better microphone and a what is that word? Camera. Camera is the word I'm looking for, so that you can see and hear me better. You may notice that I'm rotating my screen a lot. I think I've talked about this before. This is largely a haptics choice. If you've ever sat down and drawn something, or even written something, we don't really hold the paper straight when we write or draw. We move it all the time. Drawing on an easel makes this really complicated, and you end up doing it with your body and looking like an idiot. The nice thing about having a computer is that you can just tap your R key, and it brings this rotate. You can turn your whole drawing around, and especially if you've got curves to do, like you're drawing a circle or something like that, or tracing a circle, anything like that, makes it a lot easier to turn it. So you capitalize off your instincts and turn the computer, you turn your canvas, pardon me, don't go turning your computer. Turn the canvas any way that makes it easiest for you to get the lines that you want to. Now, if you are using not a tablet screen, but a regular tablet, and you're dealing with the gap between where your hand is and where your eye is supposed to be, try turning the tablet itself. Try turning it into an easier position to move through. It might help you. It might not. It's a challenging thing to draw and not be looking at the thing that your hand is on. Not to mention all the translational issues with the technology if there's a delay or anything like that. But it might help you. Now my hotkeys are
Okay.
fucking up. Ooh, can I say that word? Well, it's the internet, so I hope so. Okay, so my keyboard isn't completely dead. It just decided to not cooperate at all for a little bit. I could probably stand to beef up the lines on her face here. She's really not as clearly or as thickly defined as Manifold or Falcon, and she is on the same level as Falcon. That might be worth another pass later, but right now I really like how she's coming out. It's a little bit more refined. It's a little bit more detailed. Not necessarily more detailed, but it looks crisper. I think what was going on when I was working on Falcon is I had a much bigger pencil, and I kind of stuck myself with my 0.3 and worked things up close. Maybe that's okay. Maybe the inking is when I go and resolve all that stuff. That's perfectly acceptable. I'm just gonna keep going. Always got to be careful with any of these kind of repeated patterns and keeping them in perspective with one another. So this could potentially be pretty challenging. Because as they get nearer the viewer, the perspective changes a little bit. Map basically goes down right to about here where we have the beads. Sorry, I'm just thinking about the costume and how to make this work. We're basically going to say that right here is where that blue breastplate starts. So now so we've got, grooves. Uh, Whenever we're dealing with something like a groove or a repeated shape, I'm not a big fan of taking the shortcut. What I mean by that is, it'd be very easy to just go make a straight line here. I feel like it's less interesting, I feel like that's kind of cheap, and it doesn't tell your audience anything except that you kind of didn't take the time to draw it. This is a really interesting costume. It's very culturally appropriate, from my understanding. I'd love to just go in and take the time to give it the credit that the original designers did. If you're going to do fan art, make sure you do it the way that you enjoy and think celebrates the OC. And by the OC, of course, I mean the original content, not that weird Fox show circa early 2000s. My favorite is when a fan artist does a better rendition of an OC than the original creator. It's few and far between, and probably a lot of discussion as to the artistic merit of something like that. But it's always fun to see, just as an observer. I could probably stand to do a better job of actually making these circular. Haven't made my job super easy with the way I laid them in during the concept or sketch phase. I'm going to make this one the foremost one. Upon second consideration, I think this is actually the one closest to the camera. My dog is wondering who I'm talking to. Not wondering loudly enough to really do anything about it, but wondering nonetheless. Hey. Hey! Sorry. Reprimand the pooch. I don't know if you heard that loud popping sound, but that was my shoulder. I don't recommend it. Overall, I like that. The beads look a little bit wobbly. I think that could stand to be corrected, but I think I'm going to leave it for now. What I think is really neat about this costume is that there's a very specific amount of asymmetry. You have a lot of things where it looks symmetrical at first glance, and then there's something here that is just given my... You guys seeing that? What the hell is that? It's very frustrating. There's some sort of hiccup on the screen there, or there was. If my tech guy is watching this, you should figure out what the fuck that was. So for example, back to asymmetry. She's got these shoulder plates, and they both have the same shape. One of them has grooves, and the other one does not. Have no assumptions or theories as to what the grooves do or what purpose they serve. But it's a nice little bit of asymmetry. See? Nope. Nope. probably saying to yourself, what the hell is wrong with you? Why do you keep redrawing that same line over and over again? With, you know, really nice, graceful curves, it's about the confidence of the stroke. And, stroke. And when you don't have it, you don't have it. And you just Control Z and you do it again. Because going in and fussing over it, you make a line and you're like, oh, I don't like it, I want to fix it, and you end up with this big, messy, micro-adjusted thing, and then you gotta go in, you gotta clean it up, and you gotta try and fix it again, and clean it up, and fix it again, and you end up getting nowhere fast. So I try not to do that. I'd rather redraw the same line 100 million times. I don't necessarily know that I've accomplished anything here, because I don't really like how that looks. But that's okay. And I may leave this one alone for now and come back and do a really rough sketch on another layer to kind of figure it out, and then pencil it in again later. I don't envy the artists who are on the clock, so to speak, when they do this. I mean, I'm on the clock, but just in terms of how much time we spend together. That's nice. That's a note for me for later. As you can see here from our reference photo that on the left, she is, well, her right, our left, she is exercising her Second Amendment right to bear arm. It's a terrible joke. But that, I'm gonna go and throw in the anatomy on her right arm here. This transition into and out of the elbow is always tough, and line quality can be so important here. I like that. I'll keep it. think I like how that looks. See if I change my mind later. I wonder if I'm giving anybody else seizures when I do that. It doesn't freak me out because I know it's coming, but you probably don't expect it. Is this like the art version of Shaky Cam? Am I Your Cloverfield? Or Jumper, or whichever of the many shitty Shaky Cam moves you need before the internet comes and jumps down my throat. I actually really like Cloverfield and Chronicle and Jumper and stuff like that. It's hard on the eyes. Okay, 1 second. I gotta let the dog out. I'm doing that thing I said I really shouldn't do. Oh, welcome back, Doggo. Alright, those don't look too bad. I kind of want another necklace here, but I don't really think it's going to be a meaningful use of space. Oh, it's thundering. Doggo's scared of thunder. That's what's going on. You can probably hear it. So what's gonna happen is Doggo's gonna come in and out of the room repeatedly, and then go hide it behind my roommate's toilet. Don't know why he likes my roommate's toilet. It's just how it works. That's nice. So what I'm going to do here is just draw through the arm. she's got those bands on, and they're going to be most easily rendered if this is just drawn all in. Again, done a fairly light job here in indicating their presence. Her hand here, so it goes up to here. She's going to need some more work, but we're starting to get this to come together pretty heartily, I think. Alright, so that's going to wrap it up for this week. You will get to see wherever I land on this for the month of February. I will start a new one for March, regardless on where I leave this. Even if it is incomplete, which is not the plan, but it might happen. I'll start a new one in March so that you're not staring at the same thing for months at a time. And then I'll go and finish it on my own time. Alright, save this. And there is everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, this is Mike Makes Stuff, telling you to make more stuff.